Okay, thank you everybody for showing up tonight. This is a first of two meetings that we're hosting with the developer Josh Stites for the Preserve at Priest Lake neighborhood. The purpose of this meeting and then one next week is to get feedback from the community about the aesthetics and types of materials and other factors they would like to see in this community. And the developer will write all this down and we'll figure out what can work in the development. And after these two meetings, we should have a good idea of what this neighborhood will look like and what the legislation will be, and we'll submit that at the end of the month and start the process rolling. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Stites, who's going to give a brief presentation about the development, and then we will get down to the reason we're all here tonight.
Excellent. Thank you, Councilman. Thank you for setting this meeting up, and thank you for everybody for being here. My name is Josh. This is the Preserve at Priest Lake is, and I'm sorry if everybody already knows this. Somebody stop me, but I'm going to pretend like I'm telling somebody for the first time. So there's actually two parcels involved: 3128 Elm Hill Pike and another parcel to the north of 3128 that is unnumbered. Those comprise just a little over 6 acres. Current zoning is RS10, which is low to medium density residential, allowing 3.7 dwelling units per acre. So the current zoning allows 23 single family lots. What we have proposed is a specific plan zoning. You also hear that called SP zoning. And just a quick summary of what SP is. It's a zoning district which provides additional flexibility to create developments that meet the goals and objectives of Nashville Next and are sensitive to the surrounding context. Because it's kind of a unusual zoning, I thought I'd give a few examples of others that are nearby. One is the parking lot that the airport built right down Elm Hill Pike. That's an SP zoning. One is Child Care USA, which this property surrounds. It is an SP zoning. And there's a house at 425 Woodbury Court, right across I-40, that is SP zoning. And so SP can literally be anything. It could be industrial, it could be a daycare center, it could be a home. But the beauty of SP zoning is that the specifics, rightly named, the specifics of what is allowed, the property rights term is what's entitled for that property, that use can only be allowed. So if you say this can only be a house, a 3-bedroom house, then it can only be a 3-bedroom house. So why SP? It gives greater control to the neighborhood. It creates a known product for the builders of the neighborhood, as well as housing providers, of what they would be allowed to build. And it provides ample opportunity for community input, which is obviously why we're all here tonight. I do want to point out, because this question got brought up before, why don't you just rezone it to a density that would allow the 38 units? And from a person who's trying to develop it, my answer is that would be any landowner's preference. But an SP gives the neighbors more control and more expectation for what is going to be allowed. So let me digress here for just a moment and say, the question often gets asked of me, well, what's your plan? What are you going to do? And so there's kind of three routes. One, we take it to the point of entitlement, get the entitlement changed, and then we sell it to a developer builder. Taking a little bit further, the second option would be we get the entitlements changed, and then we develop the lots and we sell the lots to a home builder. And then the third option, and the furthest, if you will, route, is that we get the entitlements changed, we get the land developed with lots, and then we build the houses ourselves. We're not set up to build the houses ourselves. And so I don't think that's the route we're taking. I've said all along, my intent is we would get the entitlements changed, and then we would build this neighborhood, build the lots for this neighborhood. However, if we change the zoning and the next guy buys it, or you buy it, or anybody else buys it, or we maintain it, there's only one thing we can do, or anybody else that owns it can do, and that is what is specifically in this SP. And so if you said that every house has to be painted green, then whether I build it or you build it or the next guy or the guy after that actually builds it, the houses have to be green. And that's kind of the beauty of the SP, because it protects the neighborhood while still allowing zone changes like this to take place. And I assume, Councilman, if someone has a question, you'll interrupt me and let me know.
Sure will.
I may not see it. So just real briefly, why SP? And the answer to that is because this is what we heard from our community meetings. So we had our first one February of 2020 in person. We had the next two via Zoom. We applied sometime, I think February, maybe the end of January, with the planning department, based off of the meetings that we had over the previous 12 months. And the March 25th meeting, we were supposed to have the next public meeting. That was deferred due to the weird storm that was moving through town. So April 7th, we had an on-site walk. We probably had 7 or 8 neighbors who attended that, and actually got to walk out there and see where things would go and what that might look like. And then April 8th, we had another public hearing, or had the first public hearing for the application that we'll go to at the end. And in addition, had lots of individual conversations with neighbors in person and via email. So this is the proposed site plan per the SP. And as you can see, there are single family homes and there are townhomes. One of the aspects of the townhomes that we developed through the public meeting process was that there wouldn't be long rows of housing. There wouldn't be 8 and 10 townhomes connected, but there would be none bigger than 3. And so you'll see the bigger blocks are groupings of 3, the smaller blocks are groupings of 2. So what's in our SP application? What would be allowed to be built should this SP be approved at the council level? So 1 is the layout as shown on the previous slide. 2, there are 14 detached single family homes and 24 attached single family homes. And just in the rezoning application, anytime there's more than one house that would be involved in the rezoning, Metro Planning calls it a multifamily rezoning. Now, it is true that would be multifamily for the 6 acres, but it's not accurate that it's multifamily as you and I would probably know the term multifamily. So it's not apartments. These are built to be owner occupied homes. No less than 70% of the exterior siding will consist of either brick or cementitious siding, such as hardy plank. All 38 homes would be governed by an HOA. That also is something, all these really are all these bullet points are things that have directly come from our public meetings, with the exception of the last one, which came from planning staff. Short-term rentals, like Airbnbs, will not be permitted, and all homes will have attached garages. The building facades that face Elm Hill Pike will be treated as the primary facade, meaning that will be built to be the front door of the house. It'll include sidewalks to get to it. It will include a covered porch of a minimum size and landscaping along the front. And so what planning staff is going for is so that as you're driving down Elm Hill Pike, you're not looking at the side or the back door of a house, but that it has a very attractive appeal. So our application was developed after conversations with the community through our public engagement process. We then put forth our application, and the planning department then begins their review process. So when the planning department begins their review, they have their own comments, and then they send it to these other departments: the fire marshal, Metro Water, Metro Stormwater, Public Works, Traffic and Parking, and the Metro School Board. Staff analysis was this was a proper use per their analysis, and that they would recommend approval to the full commission. Traffic and parking recommendation was that so how the recommendations work is they almost all of them approve with conditions. And traffic and parking's approved with the condition was that we install a turn lane for westbound traffic on Elm Hill Pike on the Timber Valley Drive. And although we would be responsible for doing that, we're not actually out there with the paintbrush, and building the turn lane. They have obviously standards in which they build to, and certain contractors can do that. So staff recommended approval with conditions, disapprove without all the conditions. And the planning commission, after discussion, voted approval of the SP application. One thing I want to pull out two things from the Metro Planning Department's review, and this document is available on their website from the April 8th meeting. So if you wanted to go see that, that is still available. One is that note number 6 states that that any reference to the layout of the housing or the plan, that it's conceptual or that it's illustrative, that it be removed. That Metro Planning does not view the layout as it is as conceptual. They view it as, this is what we're approving. And so I think it should be viewed as significant from your perspective as a neighbor, because what we have here on paper is what we would be allowed to build. I take this to mean from Metro Planning that we can't go back and say, well, we changed our mind, we want to move all the single family houses to the back of the development. That's not an option. We have to build it to the plan that was approved. And then the traffic study, Metro traffic engineers reviewed our proposal and compared it to the current zoning. The current zoning, mind you, allows 23 single family homes. These are what we're proposing is 38 single family homes, but that are smaller in size. And the traffic study that Metro did said that they believed that it would produce less traffic on Elm Hill Pike than if it was built to the current zoning entitlement standards. So this is their review of how they do that calculation. And so I was a little bit wanted more color as to if they could explain this. And so their explanation is what we're proposing would be something that was geared more towards two groups in particular, in their view. Singles, like young professionals, and retired couples, so seniors. And because of that, their use of the roads, especially at peak hours, because they're not delivering children to and from school, is decreased than less than if we built 23 single family homes as the land currently allows. Now, we've talked about this in the past. I know Mike in particular doesn't necessarily agree with their analysis. And certainly that's up for debate with them, not with me, but they believe that what we have proposed would actually produce less traffic on Elm Hill Pike.
Oh, I don't disagree with that, but I don't agree with the target audience. I agree that yes, doing 1 and 2 bedroom, and maybe even some 3 bedroom family homes would create less traffic. I do support that. I just have reservations about doing that clientele. The target clientele that we want in this neighborhood is not the singles, the people just moving to Nashville. We are seeking to populate this area with more of the people that are in this area, and that is families that have children, that have long-term commitments to the neighborhood.
And senior citizens.
Well, and on the topic of senior citizens, sure, that's certainly an option. There is another development coming into the area that is targeted specifically at that. Just like there is another development across the interstate that's being targeted at that young urban professional group. And the concern with especially the young urban professional group is that creates a lot of transient housing. It's transient people coming in, they're only here for a few years and then they leave. And that's obviously not what our target audience is. So that's kind of my take on it. So I don't disagree with their assessment of the traffic study. I agree with it, but it's conditional based on the target audience.
This is the current land. I assume everyone here is familiar with it. The windows on, I don't know if you've driven by and looked closely, those of us that walk the land April 8th or April 7th could see they've all been broken out. And you can see Metro Police records indicating that there have been more than one arrest made in this area. I want to say one thing here. The way we have laid this out allows for somewhere between 1.5 acres and 2 acres of unused, undisturbed land. I'm not trying to pitch that you're going to see wild elk and black bear roaming that 1.5 acres, but I do think it's significant that in a neighborhood of this size of 6.5 acres, 6.2 acres, that you would see almost 1/3 or up to 1/3 of it preserved. And to some people that's not a big deal, and that's okay. To others, that's a big deal, and I think it's a big deal. This would be the first investment, one of the first major investments in District 13 since Woodland Point. And as we've had conversations at some of our other meetings, public and private investment follows other public and private investments. And so I would just offer to you that I think this is a reasonable use of this land that it certainly increases the density, but it does so very responsibly, and I think overall would be good for the area. So that's my those are my comments. If you have any questions, there's my email and my phone number. I welcome you to shoot me a text or email or give me a call, and I'll be available to you.
Hey,
Well,
Josh, can you go back to the slide that has the layout of the community, and we'll kind of use that as a backdrop as we continue our discussions.
I'll probably chime in since I'm probably the most vocal, it seems like. And certainly, thank you, Josh, for doing this. And I think we all recognize that, that land needs to be developed. It needs to be used. We know it's going to be used. Although I'm not a huge proponent of the SP plan based on the daycare situation, that was not a good circumstance, condition, and it still is not. But at the same time, we also recognize that, progress has to be made, and in doing so in a controlled fashion. Now, we did see a small development happen there at the end of Timber Valley. So you're absolutely right in the fact that if it stays zoned the way it is, we could have a whole bunch of that, and that obviously we don't want either. Now, obviously, those are single family homes, and that's what it could be zoned as. So I think you're right in the fact that our best opportunity is collaborating with you to try to give you what you're looking for and also satisfy our concerns as well. So I think we can do that. Although, again, I'm not a proponent of the SP zoning, there doesn't seem to be a lot of options for us to collaborate. So there's going to have to be some give and take. So giving in to the SP zoning, but then at the same time, we're asking you to give in on some of the conditions of the property and conditions of the development. Some of those being, like I mentioned, 2 bedrooms. Obviously, 2 bedrooms are going to start bringing in some of that same sort of clientele I mentioned a moment ago that we are not seeking for this environment, for this neighborhood. But at the same time, doing, attached townhomes, in many cases can be much more aesthetic than a whole bunch of tall and skinnies that are only 30 feet apart. So I think we can come to that collaborative, middle ground, given some of the circumstance and some of the conditions, albeit the structure of the development, the housing materials, the layout of the properties in more detail than this, making sure that they all have 2-car garages and that they have a parking space between the garage and the road. Creating that kind of aesthetic will foster the type of clientele that we're seeking to retain in the neighborhood, the long-term residents, whether they be elderly or, long-term families. Because that's, again, going back, that's our target. That's our target from the neighborhood perspective.
Well, I'll add real quick, this desire to have families move into the area. I definitely understand that. And one way we can look at this is we have lots of larger homes, especially like Harborview area, Larchwood. There may be individuals who are in their 50s, children have moved out. They don't need such a big home. They might, would rather have something like this where they don't have to worry about mowing the yard or the landscaping. And so they can move into this and thereby opening up one of the larger family homes for a family to move into. So, and I think, this could help open up possibilities within the neighborhood to bring in the families that you and the other members of the community are looking for. It's all about giving the opportunities for people to kind of move around, you know.
No, and I don't disagree with you, Russ, but at the same time, we already have a whole lot of what you've just described in this area, whether it's Woodland Point, whether it's over in the middle of Larchwood, condominiums, of course, what they're building on the other side of the interstate and up Stewart's Ferry Pike, of course, Patio Villa. So we already have a lot of the home life that you're describing for that audience. What we don't have enough of, and this is evident throughout all of Nashville, is the single family homes like we have today. That target audience. And
These are all single family homes, though. I understand you think there needs to be a family home that's marketed only to people that have children starting kindergarten, but what does that home look like? These are all single family homes that would fit that mold.
Well, I mean, townhomes across the street from me are considered single family homes, but I know 3 out of the 6 across the street from me, 3 of those are families that are looking for a house with a yard in this area, preferably in this neighborhood. So that's why I say that's really the target audience, because that's what we're really missing in our neighborhood, in this neighborhood, because we have a lot of these duplexes like across the street from me, and the multifamily townhomes buildings that you've got here. You're right, they are single family homes, but it's a different clientele. They're classified as single family homes, but I use the term loosely. When I say single family homes, I'm saying the target audience are people that are going to move into the neighborhood and stay in the neighborhood for the next, like myself, 30 years, because we want to stay here.
So with these homes, how many bedrooms do you envision these being? Do you envision them being a 3-bedroom home? Fit more of what you're looking for?
I would target them, to 3-bedroom homes. Now, to your point, with some of the options, maybe 90-10, certainly no less than 80-20, having, 3 bedrooms versus 2 bedrooms, in order to try to target that audience. Okay. And availability. I mean, so
that's part of what this meeting is about, is putting those details. So I'm going to make a note. I'm sure Josh is going to make a note that what this SP will list is, I think an 80-20 might be kind of the standard. So if we want to do 80-20, 3-bedroom versus 2-bedroom, we can put that in there. One thing I would like to add is make sure that the master bedrooms are on the first floor. That way, if there are individuals who are looking to downsize, that they don't have to worry about going up and down stairs, and the upper rooms could be more of their guest room. So I'm going to add that the master bedroom is on the first floor. Now, when we did the walkthrough, I kind of suggested maybe putting, to help attract families, maybe a small playground and maybe a dog park that's not on Elm Hill Pike, but maybe it's more in the back, that it's specific for that neighborhood. Maybe right there towards the end, right across from that last parking lot and last row of townhomes. And if there's a way we could integrate some kind of walking trail, to provide some outdoor exercise for anyone living there. Those are my comments and ideas.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, having 2-car garages attached to each unit, with a 1-car parking space between the garage and the street, I think also adds to that, and I'll use the word atypical, family environment, and it's going to start reaping that type of clientele. When I think you get a lot of street parking and, shall we say, more apartment style parking conditions, it gives a completely different sense of character.
I don't disagree with that. I would just offer that I think 2-car garages are, would I love to have them? Absolutely, no doubt about it. I think it's overkill for if you have a senior citizen who lives by themselves, they're a widow or widower, or never been married, whatever. They don't need a 2-car garage, and same for that single individual who lives by themselves. And if we're putting the master, putting the master bedroom on the first floor, then putting a 2-car garage, you start to have room. You start to run out of room.
Yeah, no, I agree with the challenge of the space, but and I can concede to having the 1-car garages on the 2-bedroom units. But certainly for the 3-bedroom units, I would definitely target that, because our target audience, again, is not that single individual. That single individual, their target is going to be the development they're building across the interstate right now. So
I don't think we can plan to discriminate based on marital status, though, Mike. Whether someone,
but we've got to build for characteristics.
Hi, this is Matt Wilkinson with the planning department. I'm going to jump in real quick. I've been chatting with Lisa Milligan, who's the manager of the land use planning division. We cannot regulate the location of the master bedroom, nor can we regulate the number of bedrooms per unit, because that's essentially beyond the capabilities of the planning department, as well as it doesn't account for what people do when they buy the property, because something could be listed as a bedroom but converted to an office, and because of that, it would be a non-enforceable condition.
Right, but you can build it with a target. You can build it with certain characteristics of a target audience. Now, I agree with you. You can't predefine, what they can use it for, and you certainly can't discriminate, but you can build it with characteristics that are going to draw a certain clientele, family environments, versus non-families.
I will say,
okay, if I can jump back in real quick again.
Yeah, go ahead.
So when we make decisions regarding land use and entitlements, we can't really make the decision on the basis of who's going to buy the units. That's a form of housing discrimination. What we can do is say we're going to build X number of units at a certain density, and they're going to have such and such materials, and they're required to have a garage, and they're required to have such and such parking. And we can do all that. We can do landscaping and everything. But we can't really say we're going to require this because of that. So we can't say we're going to do all 3 bedrooms because we want families here. And that's where we're getting into some housing discrimination.
Yeah, no, I certainly understand. And that's my concern about having this zoned SP in the first place. That's why I was holding out for it to be zoned standard residential, so that there is a little bit more of a standard configuration options available for the property at that point. But, being zoned SP, it opens up that ball to being anything. And you're right, now we don't have some of those controls in place.
Councilman, I'd like to make a comment here, if I
Go
may.
ahead.
We're 40 minutes into this discussion. We've discussed nothing about what this meeting is for. This has been a plan that's been ongoing for over a year. People have made their opinions very clear on who they want in the neighborhood, who they don't, what they want it to be, what they don't want it to be. I would like to see this meeting actually go towards what it's actually meant to be. Let's talk about the details. Let's get things ironed out. Sidewalks, garages, landscaping, etc. The plan's already been approved. Josh is either going to build it or he's going to sell it. Sitting here and, I'm sorry, going round and round about what families can and cannot be in this area is nonsense, and it's highly offensive. So I would like us to get this meeting on topic and get to the discussion of what it's supposed to be. And I appreciate you putting this on. Josh, I appreciate you being here, but we need to get this going. Thank you.
yes, sir. If I could speak to Councilman, to your concerns about the master bedroom on the first floor, even though I understand now Matthew has said that's not something the planning department can dictate, just from what the market wants perspective, that would be something that we would do. Now, who's to say that the next guy that moves in doesn't actually turn the master bedroom in upstairs? Of course, that's not anything that any of us can control, but obviously we would want these homes, or anybody that we sold a lot to, we would want them to be able to sell these homes to as wide a market as possible, which would obviously include that segment of the market that really wants the master bedroom on the first floor. So, message received. I hear you. What about sidewalks? Matt, you mentioned sidewalks. Is there something in particular that we could implement in this plan that would be helpful?
So just looking at the site plan that you've got, it
Yeah.
looks like there, are drawn in sidewalks from the front of the units and around the sides and around some. I think having one side of the street or the other, just having a continuous sidewalk for those that live there that don't have to walk in the middle of the road, that they can actually have a place dedicated to them to walk their dog, walk their children, walk from the back of the complex up to the front or wherever. So I think adding a side, adding some type of walking path sidewalk throughout the community would be something nice to see.
Absolutely. And Matthew, would you be able to weigh in on that? I think we would be required when we build the road to add the sidewalks.
You are going to you're going to be required to do sidewalks along your frontage along Elm Hill Pike. Within the SP plan, it looks like you're doing sidewalks around the perimeter of each unit area along the internal drives. So it looks like your plan actually shows sidewalk on there. But that determination would come on the basis of Public Works and the planning department's review. Let me see if I can get a better view because I think that's already on your plan.
And we would, just from a market, given the market what it wants, we definitely would want sidewalks that lead from the furthest house all the way to the most eastern part where the green space is. Mm-hmm. And so we would definitely have, we would just want, from a market standpoint, to be able to show potential residents how they can get to the public space. But if there's a way to codify that in the SP, we're all the more game.
Sidewalks can be a condition, and it does look like the sidewalks are being included on the plan.
Now, will each unit have a fenced-in patio or yard? And can we put in the SP, will they be like full-on privacy fence made out of wood, or would we rather see, like you're seeing some newer communities where it's just like the black fencing? Is that a condition we can put in the SP, Matthew?
We can do stuff along the, like we could do perimeter fencing and whatnot. Just looking at it, are these in the units on the front that face Elm Hill Pike? They will be facing Elm Hill Pike, and I believe are the rears where the garages are. Is that going to be the rear of the house?
Yeah. So the garage would be the back of the house, and that faces north towards the
and the other freestanding multifamily on the other side. Those are going to be fronted with the driveway in the front, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And then on the attached units, are they going to be fronted to the driveway, or are they going to be fronted to the common area in between the buildings?
That's a good question. I assumed, I don't know that we have a strong preference one way or the other, but I assume that they would front the road. And
okay.
When we originally designed these, we had more townhomes and fewer detached single family homes. And the concept was that there's a large common area in the back in between the buildings. And there's a development, it's close to the intersection of 440 and 65 South that does this perfectly. And it's like having It's like having a green alley in the back.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. So to Councilman Bradford's point, I don't know if we can really codify it on a unit by unit basis, because each unit's going to be a little different. Definitely the ones along Elm Hill Pike probably won't have any sort of private patio area, just based on how they're designed, with the fronts along Elm Hill Pike in the back being that access to the parking pad or the garage or whatever is going to be a part of that. The ones along the other side, the other freestanding ones, they may be able to have it, they may not. It depends on the topography, whether a patio is feasible or not. So in that regards, I would probably leave that to developer standards and based on what they feel the market demand is, and focus more on perimeter landscaping and how it buffers, or in like an internal walking path in that area that he was leaving undisturbed. If you feel like a more active common open area is more beneficial than a passive common open area.
And building materials, is that something else that we are allowed to put in this?
Yes, that's one of the most common reasons why SPs are done, is to regulate building materials, so you can regulate that to your heart's content.
So that, again, another reason why we're having this is, do we want these to be all brick? Do we want them to be partial brick? Do we want some stone? You know, what would be the overall aesthetic
Yeah,
the community would like to see?
And I will say on the on the individual units, like if I would leave that more, but if you wanted to say like no vinyl fencing within the development, you can do something like that. I would just steer clear of saying every unit needs to have a patio, just in case the topography doesn't really allow for every unit to have a patio, or the way it sits in relation to the drives.
Okay. Josh, did you have an idea of kind of the overall aesthetic for the units?
Yeah. So as we have talked about in previous meetings, my thought process was kind of like the Grove and Mount Juliet. That is a good example from a what the architectural style might look like. I mean, they're going to be a little different because all of those are one stories, I think, in the Grove. Woodland Point, I think, is a great example. And Woodland Point has, in the back of Woodland Point is a section that's called the Point. You drive past these pillars that say the Point. And when you reach that point, all the houses are either brick or hardy siding, some cementuous siding. And so, of course, I would like to have as much flexibility as possible, just because what we decide tonight, we may all be off on what the market really wants. And so, I serve here at the pleasure of the councilman, but if as much flexibility as we could give potential home builders, while still putting whatever guardrails we need in place to make the neighborhood feel like they're not getting a low grade product, would be my preference. So what does that sound like?
I think that's a good idea. I would definitely maybe ensure that that these units use some brick to them. That way they kind of act as a good kind of mesh between most of the older single family detached homes in the area were typically constructed out of brick, whereas on the other side of this development, you've got a lot of the condos and townhomes that are more vinyl siding or some kind of siding. So having them being a mixture and having maybe a majority of the building be some form of brick to act as a kind of that natural buffer between the two different types of housing we have.
Okay.
And commonly for building material regulations, it's usually something along the lines of a certain percentage of brick. So 40%, 50%, 60%, 70% brick. And then the remainder can be hardy or fibrous cement board. And usually vinyl siding, masonite, aluminum siding are all prohibited.
Most of the houses in the area are half brick and half either siding or cedar lap siding or some hardy board.
I would say if for a quality product from aesthetic standpoint, no aluminum siding, no vinyl siding.
I would say maybe do 50% brick and then the rest be either a hardy board or some kind of wood.
Okay, could we say 50% brick or stone?
I'd be in agreement with that.
There's no problem regulating stone on Metro's end. We could just list it as 50% masonry, which would include brick and stone, or split it out, however.
Okay. So
For the wood part, would we have to specify hardy board, cedar planking?
The way that the condition would read is it would say all units shall be a minimum of 50% brick or stone or masonry. And then the remainder shall be a combination of either or a combination of fibrous cement siding or wood siding.
somebody had made the comment, no vinyl or aluminum siding. I'm all for that. The only caveat I might request is that I would say no more than like 10%, because there are some places like above dormers and things where there's nothing to hold a brick or nothing to hold stone that you need some kind of siding. You need some kind of light gauge siding to go there. It's not a prominent feature. It's just kind of functional. Would that be reasonable?
What do you know? Like what percentage? Like would it be 1%, 2%, 10%?
Well, I'm because we live in Woodland Point. That's what I know, and I know in Woodland Point. I think it says, and Kelly may know this better than me, but I think it says 30%, which it probably is a lot more than it needs to be. I would think like 10 or 15 would be.
Well, and I can look at older. When Councilman Bradford brings the bill forward, and I'm editing it to include his conditions, I can just look at old ones because I know they've exempted things for like vinyl can be used in certain situations where practical, and there's certain language that goes in there that should free that up.
And maybe there's another product, Matthew, that you've seen in other SPs or similar situations that you can still exempt and say no vinyl, but there's some other product that would work. And I'm certainly not married to vinyl. I'm just want to make sure that we don't create a problem inadvertently.
Yeah, I'll take a look. And also, planning and codes aren't like, I mean, they're sticklers, but if it's just not feasible and the only product that will work is vinyl, then they're not going to like say, oh no, you have to go all the way back, because they'll work with you a little bit, and codes will definitely know of all the materials and everything in case there's something better out there.
Okay, thank you. So sidewalks along the road, sidewalks to the back common area where there would be a dog park and kids play area. No vinyl fencing, no vinyl siding, no I don't know, did we settle on a percent of masonry?
I think we're doing 50-50.
50-50? Okay.
Someone correct me if I understood that wrong. And Matthew, just to confirm again, like asking for the dog park and a play.
Yeah, that's fine. We
play
can ask.
area.
We
can
can
do
ask for
that?
the. Yeah, we can ask for more active amenities. So if you want to say a playground and a dog park shall be required to be located in the common open area, that can be done.
Okay.
I will say I might reach out. We might want to reach out to Lisa to see about the best language to make sure it's enforceable, but we can do that.
Okay.
I will point out we've got proposed open space dog park on the plan that was approved. So that.
So the dog park's already required.
Okay. Yeah, I see it. The typing was kind of small, but I see it right here.
Yeah.
Something dog park. So, and that's the kind of area I had pictured doing something like that. It's still it's close enough to the community for it to be accessible, but it's also far enough away from the communities behind it where I don't think the noise would be too big of an issue, and
Right.
especially keeping the trees there.
And for those who were not involved in previous conversations, when I initially proposed this, I had I called it a pocket park, a half-acre park at the southwestern corner of the property that bordered Elm Hill. That would be a park that would be deeded over to Metro for dog park, and surprisingly to me, almost unanimously, the neighbors who were attending that meeting said, "We don't want that. That would cause, public vagrants and people hanging around that we wouldn't want in the neighborhood." So we started out with a public park. Now we're at a private park.
What about any sort of gate into the community?
I think if we do that, then we've got to make the streets private, and we would not want to do that for the future residents.
I think your streets already are I wasn't familiar with this project before tonight. The internal drives are already private drives, correct?
I don't know. I assumed they were public, Matthew.
We do have issues from a couple of the neighboring subdivisions, areas that do have some vagrancy that do wander into some of the other areas of the neighborhoods. So it would be I think a consideration and a selling point potentially.
Does the SP, could that cover like the type of material for the drives inside, whether the main roads within the community are either asphalt or that I'm trying to think, like the paving stone that you would find at the parking lot of like McKay's, or I think Frank Batson put it in one of his more recent developments over off Donaldson Pike.
We can regulate paving material, but it will need to be strong enough to handle a fire truck and whatnot. So, I mean, it needs to be built to certain standards, and if that allows for a certain design, that's possible. Otherwise, standard cross sections are usually what they go with for these. And I've asked Lisa real quick. So it might be something I follow up with you guys at the next one, whether or not these drives are private. But usually on HPRs like this, the drives are considered private because it's within a single lot and it's only serving those people that live there. They're not public streets. They're not serving any public function. And there've been a couple of instances, especially over in Antioch, where there've been a handful that have been done as public alleys. But I mean, it's generally not considered best practice at Metro. Usually, if it's in an HPR like this, they're considered private streets. But I'll get you a final answer on that next meeting.
And if they are private streets, then that means it'd be the HOA's responsibility to maintain the streets and the sidewalks.
Yeah, that would be the case. They would all be maintained by the HOA, and so the liability is on the HOA. It's not on the taxpayer.
And if you haven't considered it, I would certainly consider a fence around the entire property for the same reason.
And based on earlier conversations, Matthew, that's something we could put in the SP because it's the exterior.
Yeah, we can require perimeter fencing.
I like the idea of the perimeter fencing. My only concern is the acre of open land that we're leaving. If we put a perimeter fence around that, then you potentially keep out the wildlife that you're trying to sell this open land for.
Yeah, we can, when we do the condition, we can just say along like the south, the east, the north to a certain point, or like to the edge of the pavement of the private drive or public drive if it's public, and around the dog. Like,
Oh,
Yeah, I
definitely.
was gonna say, if you could do the fence to encompass the dog park area and leave everything else, I think that would probably be perfect.
Well, I think the west side and the northwest side, and then the front side facing Elm Hill Pike are probably the most critical.
And thanks to the child care center, you've already got a fence right
Yeah.
there.
Yep.
Sure.
I got an answer on the internal drives. The internal drives were approved as private drives.
Okay. I didn't know that.
Now, with the perimeter fencing, could we specify that it'd be two different types? Because definitely the west and north would have to be tall enough to make sure people can't come through. But at the same time, any fencing along Elm Hill Pike,
Yeah,
I don't want people driving by and looking at big, tall fences.
yeah, we can do that. Like we can say like the fencing along shall be such and such, and the fencing along the sides and rear shall be such and such. So we can do two separate fences.
I would ask you to think about for fencing. It's going to be primarily for aesthetics. I know there is a functional component to fencing, but there, as the councilman pointed out, there is a fence along the southeastern border. There is a fence along the western border as well, to the gentleman's along the gentleman's driveway who lives to the north. So are we thinking the the fence would be along Elm Hill Pike and what you see from Elm Hill Pike? So maybe up the short extension of property along the detention pond on the southeast corner. And certainly there would be one for the dog park as well.
Yeah, I'm just thinking if I lived in that neighborhood, knowing what some of the surrounding environments are, I personally would want some sort of fencing. Now, it doesn't have to be a solid brick wall, but at least a deterrent fencing, similar to what's next to the apartment complex over on Bell Road.
So kind of like the black.
Wrought iron looking, yeah.
That's
But-
kind of what I'm envisioning myself, especially on the
Yeah.
front.
Yeah, and again, I think, it may need repairs on a regular basis, but I think that would be a deterrent fencing as long as it's tall enough around the other edges.
Well, if we're okay.
Can we add some landscaping buffer around this fence? If it's going to be a metal type fence with slats like you would find on homes across Franklin Road versus a 6 or 8 foot privacy fence along the west side and northwest side, could we get some landscaping in there? So one, if you're living in the community, you're not looking out through bars and into the neighboring properties and kind of just add a little bit more of that aesthetic and a little bit of privacy if the fence isn't going to be a privacy fence.
Absolutely. I think, and Matthew, this is a question, but I think there's a standard landscape buffer, and they grade them A, B, C or something like that.
Yeah, so in Metro, we have standard landscape buffers, and it depends on what the zoning is going up against. And so the type is defined like type A, type B, type C. And then within that, you have options based on the available width that you can do, but the density of vegetation is the same. And so if you look on the plan, they're already required to do a Class B landscape buffer along the rear property line to the edge of their disturbance area. So they're already required to do that. And it looks like the Class B extends down the other side as well, down the western side as well. And then another bit of Class B buffer along the south property line behind, I think that's the daycare, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so yeah, so they're already doing some landscaping. If the councilman decides he wants it to be beefed up a little, we can look at going up to the next grade. But I think Class B is one of the denser ones. I think I'd have to look it up.
Hey, Matthew, for the next meeting, could you either send me or send Josh maybe some pictures or images of what these different buffers look like so we can have a visual comparison?
Yeah, I can send it. I will say that it's not going to be like actual like bushes and stuff. It's going to be like a top-down view with a bunch of big circles for trees and smaller circles for bushes.
Okay.
What else?
With the driveways, we've already stated that the internal roads are going to be private. The driveways themselves, can we condition, they're either poured concrete, or they're paving stones, or et cetera? Is that something that we can condition?
Yes, I think that might start getting into like a little bit micromanagey in terms of planning review, like because when planning is going in that, I think that's something that that's pushing the limits, but I think we can like just say all driveways shall be all driveways serving the units shall be concrete, or paving stones, or something like that. But I think that's about at the max of what we can do.
I'm just thinking, if the community is interested in something aesthetically, then would they prefer to see a neighborhood that's your typical poured concrete, or some kind of aggregate, or paving stones? At the end, we could just maybe leave that up to the developer or the builder as to what they want to do. I'm throwing out ideas.
Yeah, and I will say, I think in almost all new development that I've seen, it's almost always poured concrete. That's standard, because they're already pouring the foundation. It's going to be on slab, so it's not that much extra. It's honestly cheaper than asphalt, I think, in some cases, because you already have the concrete out there.
Is there the option under the SP to define a minimum square footage for the properties from a construction standpoint?
I don't believe we can do that, but I will look into it and have a better answer for you on the next time. I know for single family, like when you're doing traditional single family subdivisions, you cannot regulate square footage because it's discriminatory, because you're setting a base. Since the pricing is based on price per square foot, you're essentially, if you say every house in this neighborhood has to be at least 3,000 square feet, you're anybody that can't afford to buy a 3,000 square foot home. And so that's a form of discrimination. But I'll take I can take a follow-up look and just confirm that would be the case on a development like this as well.
Josh, I'm sorry. This is Andy Depew. I just came on to the meeting. How big are the properties going to be? I'm sorry, I didn't get to hear the first part of the meeting.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. So there's 14 detached single-family homes and 24 attached single-family homes. and
Okay.
No bigger than 3. We don't specify number of bedrooms or square footage.
Is this gonna be a gated community?
No, sir.
Okay. On the SP, because, and I'm gonna be a devil's advocate right now because of the housing developments to my left, which is the I forget what the proper name of it is, but is it possible to make it a gated community? That way we don't have the possibility of crime in that particular subdivision.
Andy, I'll answer that. So prior to you coming on, we did discuss and put in, there's going to be fencing around the property. It's going to be probably a metal fencing with some kind of landscape buffer to ensure that there's not people walking across the property that shouldn't be there.
Okay.
I don't
And-
think we settled on the gate. I'll throw out my concern is with a gate, you're going to have to worry about the timing. And so that could possibly, add time for people getting into the property. And even with a turn lane being put into the road.
Okay.
If someone who knows more about it than I do, I feel like unless you put the gate far enough back off of Elm Hill, having a gate would kind of compound the traffic issue that we're trying to fix with the turn lane.
Right.
But someone else can
Understand.
maybe
So
correct me if
just
I'm wrong.
yeah, so looking at the site plan, I don't have a scale in front of me, but it looks like you can't put the gate past that last driveway there. So if you put it there, you may be able to squeeze like a 3-car stacking between Pike and the gate. On the other side, though, you might blocking in that last driveway there. So you may want to push that forward a little bit, but then you'd only have 1 or 2-car stacking, which could cause some backup.
Russ, you mentioned the turn lane, and is the turn lane going to consist of widening Elm Hill Pike?
Josh or Matthew, would y'all understand that? Because I know that was a condition of it being approved by planning.
So per parking, this was a question that we asked, per parking and traffic, they do not intend to widen Elm Hill. Their desire is to install.
I was just going to read the condition. The condition is stripe Elm Hill Pike at Timber Valley Drive to include 1 westbound left turn lane and 1 westbound through lane per guidance.
So
I think they believe that the pavement is wide enough to incorporate that turn lane without.
oh yeah, no, it's not. I mean, they did that already by putting the bicycle lanes in, and there's not enough lane for a bicycle to go down the road as it is with the 2 lanes of traffic. So to try to squeeze a turn lane in there, you're just asking for an accident waiting to happen.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I misinterpreted. They're restriping it, so you'll have 1 westbound turn lane and then 1 westbound through lane. So one of the through lanes is becoming a turn lane.
So you're
So
taking a
basically like
lane
the other
out of
side
the road.
bridge.
What was that, Councilman?
So it's basically going to match from what the other side of Elm Hill on the other side of the interstate, where it's basically a 2-lane road with a turn lane going all the way down. It's going to look like that.
I think I'll get with Public Works to confirm that. Like I said, I'm not really familiar with this project before tonight, so I wasn't involved with the conversations. But I'll get with Devin Doyle and confirm.
Yeah, well, if that is true, if that is the case, and you're reducing Elm Hill Pike down to 1 lane in each direction, at least through this stretch of road, I think that would probably change your traffic study as well. because your traffic study is probably initially based on two westbound and 2 eastbound lanes currently.
But the traffic study is based off of the residents in the development, and regardless of what the Elm Hill Pike is, it's not going to change.
Well, yeah, because you're narrowing your throughput. If you're taking a lane out and making it a turn lane, you're narrowing your throughput. So that changes your dynamic.
But it doesn't change your volume.
But I will say that those that condition was drafted based on the traffic study that was done, so that was taken into account. But I'll confirm it, and I'll give you a better answer at the next meeting once I get public.
And a concern might be, are you going to make all of Elm Hill Pike from the bridge to Bell Road one lane each direction now with a turn lane in the middle, or are you going to just only do it through this section of road? And keep in mind that to the east of this property, you've got a downhill hill. And if you're trying to narrow from 2 lanes westbound to 1 lane westbound because of a turn lane, that was a grave concern with the daycare as it is.
Well, on that, I'm trying to get the approval in the next budget for a traffic study for that intersection to try and, at the very minimum, get a caution light to let people know that, hey, there's a turn here. Because I've seen several instances where people are coming down that hill and they're just not paying attention.
Right.
So I'm pushing to get either getting a study done so we can get some kind of light or something right there to let people who are coming down that hill know, look, there's probably going to be somebody turning off onto Trails End. And
and that's why I would
conversations
recommend
come down to-
widening, from the property to the entrance, from the end of the daycare property to the entrance of this unit. I would recommend widening Elm Hill Pike right there for a turn lane on the westbound side.
Councilman, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Now that we're talking traffic study, I mean, we are in the process, or I should say TDOT is in the process of getting ready to change that entire area over there by the interstate where that one hill is and everything. And I know I know Elm Hill right here, right before you go from 4 lanes to 2 lanes. I mean, I understand the gentleman, and he does have a point, because Elm Hill Pike is a very busy place, and it's going to get a lot busier once TDOT reroutes Donaldson Pike, because Donaldson Pike is going to be rerouted whether we want it to or not, because of the TDOT, the new proposal the TDOT is doing because of the airport.
Well, the one question I kept asking TDOT for the last couple of years is about the bridge over I-40, but that's nowhere near their radar. They're not focusing on that bridge. It's probably never going to get widened.
Well, that's been changed, Russ, due to some of the changes in Buchanan Point, or the proposed Buchanan Point. The bridge over Elm Hill Pike Bridge over the interstate is no longer going to be an interchange. Just west of the church, between Patio Villa and the church, is where the Donaldson Pike interchange is going to, or Donaldson Pike extension is going to come out, and it's going to cross over the interstate into Buchanan Point.
When was
Oh,
that
boy.
change made? Because the last time I saw the plans and talked to TDOT about Donaldson Pike, it was going to be further down. That's why they were not going to bother with the bridge.
About a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago.
I'll follow up with TDOT on that one.
Yeah, I work for
Alright,
TDOT, so.
Okay, so with the specific plan, is there any other, we're running on about 10 minutes left, so is there any other ideas people want to throw out for either Mr. Wilkinson to do some homework on, or Mr. Stice to do some homework on? Do we feel
I would just say the homework's going to be about the fences around the fence area and what the the trees and the bushes and stuff would be along that area. And then what the fencing could possibly look like.
I think Terrace Park right now has some of that black fencing in in the front of it along Elm Hill Pike as it stands. So probably something similar to that.
Okay.
Does this development, is it going to have individual trash service at each unit, or is there going to be a community dumpster at one end?
That's an excellent question. I honestly have not thought about it, but I think each individual home would have its own dumpster.
Okay, I was just thinking if there was a community dumpster one side of the one end of the property, if there could be some type of fencing, privacy screening around that, so to just, again, keeping with a good aesthetic and not looking at trash.
Sure.
Yeah, I kind of wondered that because you look at where the road dead ends, it almost looked like that's what that was going to be, was a place for a dumpster. But at the same time, if you live on this very first house by the entrance,
Yeah.
and that was your only dumpster, you'd either have to get in your car, drive back there and drop it off, or walk.
Yeah.
So I would say individual home pickups instead of having one large communal dumpster.
And I would agree with that. Communal dumpsters usually end up meaning free for all citywide dumpsters. So,
And you invite pests into the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got some homework for next week. So we'll get that information, and we'll have this same time next Thursday, finalize everything, and then Mr. Stites and myself will have a follow-up conversation, go over everything the community has listed out, and get everything finalized. And then I believe the deadline to file the legislation is the 26th of May, for it to be on the June 1st council meeting. June 1st, it'll be the first reading, and then the second reading and the public hearing will be on the first meeting of July, with third reading the end of July. I've also explained to Mr. Stites that if at any point between now and third reading, if there's any amendments that we have to add on, I plan on deferring at least one meeting after the amendment's been added, just to give everyone plenty of time to read the amendment, understand how it's changing the plan. So if we do have to put an amendment, that might push back the timeline by a meeting or two. But I'm hoping we've been having this discussion for well over a year, so I'm hoping that we don't have to do any amendments. If we have to do an amendment, then that means that somewhere along the road, I have failed in trying to get the proper feedback and everything. So I definitely want to make sure that we are doing the best job we can, both for the developer and for the community. So if you know of anybody who would be interested in their feedback, please make sure they are aware of this meeting next week, so that we can get everything listed for us to go through. So with that, thank you, Mr. Wilkinson, for joining us tonight. Thank you, Mr. Stites. Thank you, everybody, for participating. I have recorded this, and I will put it on Facebook and YouTube with the next 24 to 48 hours. So anybody who was not able to join tonight can watch it. And again, if you know of anybody who would be interested, please let them know about next week's meeting, so that we can get all the feedback we can get. With that, thank you, everybody. Have a great evening and a great weekend.
thank you.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Russ.
Thank you, Councilman.